of this study is to explain the push factors and pull factors that affect Islamic tourism and how they support the growth of Islamic tourism practice in the nation tourism sector. The purpose of this study is to evaluate the probability for this type of tourism in non-Muslim developing countries. This is said to be so because it is considered a niche market with new needs and desire at a global level. Not only that, this study also aims to investigate the driving force behind the decision of Muslim tourists and to travel to Malaysia. To clarify the main goal of this study, structural questions were used to collect primary data. To achieve the goal of this study used a cross-sectional study design. Several statistical methods, including regression and correlation analysis, were used to analyze the data. The findings show both the incentive to push Muslim tourists and the strong effect of visitor satisfaction on word of mouth. In addition, it was found that Islamic practices have a significant moderating effect on the relationship between push-pull motive and visitors' enjoyment. The finding and recommendation of this study may conflict with the element that affect Muslim travelers in other countries. Then the research findings support the sustainability of Islamic tourism practices and the potential of positive word-of-mouth marketing among potential Muslim travelers in Malaysia. Introduction. In this chapter, we discuss about the background of study, the problem statement, the research question, the research objective, the scope of study, the significance of study, definition of terms. Lastly, background of the study. In both Muslim and non-Muslim countries around the world, academics, marketers, and practitioners are beginning to take notice of the emerging field of tourism known as Islamic tourism. Islamic tourism is a type of travel that carefully adheres to Islamic teachings and ethical guidelines regarding conduct, behavior, wardrobe, and diet according to world travel market. Due to the unique traits and requirements of Islamic visitors, this knowledge gap necessitated greater research in non-Islamic nations. This study aimed to investigate the driving force behind Malaysian Muslim tourists' decision to travel there. Finding the driving force that satisfies and empties religious demands will entice them to visit locations with religious facilities like halal restaurants and prayer rooms among others. Problem statement. While religious tourism is undoubtedly still a large portion of tourism, the phrase has lost much of its meaning and has become muddled. Today, tourism to religious places include many more aspects of tourism and is driven by a wide range of factors beyond spiritual responsibility or need. The term Islamic tourism has several different definitions. Much research has shown link between tourist travel motivation, tourist satisfaction, and tourist word-of-mouth against tourism. Tourist travel motivation, tourist satisfaction, and word-of-mouth are linked to Islamic tourism. Tourist travel motivation is multifaceted, covering push factors and pull factors in Islamic tourism. In terms of push factor, among them are family togetherness, education, knowledge, achievement, also escape, while in terms of pull factors, among them are different culture, natural scenery, cleanliness, and shopping. According to Hadiza Abdul Rahman, with a total of approximately 1.6 billion Muslim residents from more than 50 countries in the world, it is a very large market potential in the tourism industry.
Research question. 1. What is the relationship between travel motivations and Islamic tourism? 2. What is the relationship between tourist satisfaction and Islamic tourism? 3. What is the relationship between word of mouth and Islamic tourism? Research objective. 1. To determine the relationship between travel motivations and Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. 2. To determine the relationship between tourist satisfaction and Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. 3. To determine the relationship between word of mouth and Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. Definition of term. 1 is travel motivation. Travel motivation is a person's internal condition or specific requirement and desires of the tourist, and it can be regarded as one of the most significant psychological impacts on tourist behavior. 2 is tourist satisfaction. Tourist satisfaction is a measurement of how well a company in the tourism system meets or exceeds the expectation of tourists with its products and services. 3 is word of mouth. Word of mouth is an offer of performed by individuals discussing of informing others of the majority of our work comes from personal recommendation. Summary. The research is based on issue with Islamic tourism. The researcher gives the overview of the study about factors of travel motivations, tourist satisfaction, and word of mouth towards Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. The purpose of this study is to look into the issue which occur in Islamic tourism in Muslim countries like Malaysia. The researcher has defined the problem. Furthermore, measures to improve Islamic tourism to be known in non-Muslim countries by understanding the needs and wants of Muslim tourists and adapting them to the condition and suitability of the destination, while at the same time improving the quality of services to meet those needs. For example, the most important aspect to focus on when traveling are halal food, Muslim-friendly accommodation, and activities that not violate Islamic law. This chapter also introduces the research area and outlines the background and rationale for this study.
Introduction. This chapter will cover the study's independence and dependence variable. The first topic will be explore, which is motivation, satisfaction, and word of mouth. In the order to further clarify the connection between the independence and dependence variable, a conceptual framework and hypothesis will then be used. The conclusion will cover the entire discussion. Dependent variable. Dependent variable Islamic tourism. Definition of Islamic tourism. According to this study, Islamic tourism refers to travelling by Muslims who observe Islamic law and provide tourist attraction with religious amenities. Interestingly, halal drinks, food, entertainment, announcement of prayer times, prayer room, and other characteristics define Islamic tourism. Similarly, Muslim tourists are encouraged to meet the principle of Sharia law and religious belief when choosing the destination or travelling to particular site. Islamic tourism, like all forms of tourism, offers socio-economic, culture, and opportunities for its participants to further their religious objectives. Independent variable 1. Travel motivation. Travel motivation is a person's internal condition or specific requirement and desire of the tourist, and it can be regarded as one of the most significant psychological impact on tourist behavior. Travel motivation is described as a global integrating network of biological and cultural influence that give value and direction to travel decision, behavior, and experience. Travel motivation, which play a crucial role in a mechanic of tourism, are the factors that drive a traveller to make decisions about their itinerary. Independent variable 2. Tourist satisfaction. Tourist satisfaction is a measurement of how well a company in a tourist system meet or exceed the expectation of tourists, which is product and service. Survey 2007 defined tourist satisfaction as the extent of the tourist fulfillment pressure which occurred from a trip experience about the product or service feature that fulfill the tourist desires, expectation, and want in isolation with the trip. Tourist satisfaction is accrued by comparing the customer's expectation prior to the following consumption. In the content of tourism, tourist satisfaction is usually understood as a result of pre- and post-travel expectation and experience. Independent variable 3. Word of mouth. Word of mouth is offered by performed by individual discussing of informing order of. The majority of our work come from personal recommendation. According to Servobit 2009, word of mouth is a conversation that naturally occurs between people. Not only that, according to Servobit 2009 again, word of mouth is effective because the origin of trust is coming from people who did not benefit from their recommendation.
Relationship between everyone, everything, and TV. The relationship between travel motivation and Islamic tourists. The relationship between travel motivation is how they choose for themselves whether to devote a portion of their earning and free time to Islamic tourists. The primary driving force behind this Islamic tourist is the desire to travel and to get away from the routine, restrictions, and stress of daily life. Not only that, there are various cultures, natural scene, but open space and activities. The relationship between tourist certifications and Islamic tourists. The relationship between tourist certification and perceived values, destination image, and service quality influence international Muslim tourists to look to this destination for certifications. the relationship between words of mouth and Islamic tourists. The relationship between words of mouth is positive and negative remarks can both be formed by words of mouth, along with basic recommendations and information. People can easily communicate, conduct business, and access information online in today's digital age. Hypothesis. A hypothesis must be logical and testable while taking into account the most recent data and technique. A hypothesis can also be thought of as a conclusion or an explanation of the relationship between two variables. It implies that there is a predictable relationship between the independent and dependent variable. Thus, the study has proposed. Hypothesis 1. There is a relationship between travel motivation and Islamic tourism towards Malaysia's tourism sector. Hypothesis 2. There is a relationship between tourist certification and the Islamic tourism with Malaysia tourism sector. Hypothesis 3. There is a relationship between word of mouth and Islamic tourism against Malaysia tourism sector. Conceptual frameworks. A research method was proposed to examine the factors of Islamic tourism toward Malaysia tourism sector by reference to the literature review. The independent variables that has been proposed consist of three factors, which are travel motivations, tourist certification, and words of mouth. The independent variable is Islamic tourism. Summary. The study measured the factor of Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. Next, independent variables which are travel motivation, tourist certifications, and words of mouth are related to Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. In addition, the hypothesis show a positive relationship between travel motivation, tourist certifications, and words of mouth on the dependence variable of Islamic tourism. Lastly, the conceptual frameworks in this research is based on the current research question and research objective that involve two things, namely independent variables and dependent variables.
Introduction. This chapter provides a review of the research methodology such as research design, population and sample, sampling procedure, instrument, data analysis, descriptive statistics, reliability test, Pearson correlation, and lastly, summary. Population and sample. The study target population in this study is mostly the Muslim tourist population. This population was chosen because the participants in this research study enjoy visiting Islamic countries. The study's goal is to see how the encouragement of travel motivation, tourist satisfaction, and word of mouth can affect Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourist sector. Data is frequently collected based on a sample to perform a study on reliability, responsiveness, tangible, and empathy to Islamic tourism to gain information about big population. The research population can help achieve the study objective by determining tourist motivation and satisfaction with its Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector. This investigation is called sample is the number of individual sample or observation is any statistical situation such as a laboratory experiment or a public opinion poll. As a result, the research can understanding a large number of participants picked from the wider public and considered representative of the study actually population with this sample size. The sample size of a survey or experiment refers to the number of individual sample or observation used in it. The total amount of people who took part in this study was 30. The decision of the sample size to fill out the questionnaire. Customers will rate 5 stars or above on travel motivation, tourist satisfaction, and word of mouth against Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector were only considered for this study. The reason for using Google Form to establish a rating is that in comparison to other social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, Google Form is the most widely utilized by Malaysia. Because data for the entire population is sought in census, the sample size is said to be the same as the population. In experimental design, when a study may be divided into different treatment group, sample number for each group may vary. Sampling techniques. A researcher would methodically select a number group of representative objects or people from a predefined population to act as subject for observation or investigation. This methodology is known as a sampling. Our study found that sampling is a significant research phenomenon. Numeric sampling techniques are used in research. In order to fully address the research question, it is doubtful that the research will be able to gather data for every scenario. Thus, a sample must be selected. The total collection of cases from which the researcher sample was drawn is referred to as the population. Researchers utilize sampling strategies to reduce the number, for instance, because they lack the time or research to examine the entire population.
This approach of measuring travel motivation, tourist satisfaction and word of mouth in relation to Islamic tourism in Malaysia tourism sector will be described using the questionnaire. In order to gather information from respondents for a study of data set, and questionnaire is a particular kind of research tool. An open-ended and closed-ended question mix can be found on a typical research questionnaire. Section A, B, C, and D are the four elements of the questionnaire that we shall break into separately. While Section A details the respondent demographic profile, Section B describes the respondent travel motivation factors against Islamic tourism. The respondent satisfaction with Islamic tourists is then discussed in detail in Section C, and information about the respondent word of mouth about Islamic tourists in Malaysia tourism sector is provided in Section P. Data analysis. Descriptive statistic. The descriptive statistic analysis is used to describe and summarize data from general of representative study. However, inferential statistic, a different type of statistic, is needed to draw generalization about the population as well from sample. The level of collaboration will be determined by the research using descriptive analysis. Reliability test is used to assess system overall performance and stabilities over a period of time and under various distinct testing scenarios. A study instrument is regarded as straightforward, and the study result may be duplicated with the use of similar technique. Bayesian correlation. In order to establish the connection between two variables, Bayesian correlation regression analysis is performed. It is a numerical method for determining the overall significance of relationship between two variables. A higher correlation shows a broad relation between or more obvious variables, whereas a low correlation implies that the variables are most basic and seldom related. It is a process that may require a lot of paperwork to assess the importance of using readily available statistical data. The percent correlation coefficient is used to determine the degree of relationship between independent and dependent. Summary. In Chapter 3, which concludes this section, the research will go over each component of the study approach. Data for this project will be gathered quantitatively, which statistical analysis include. The introduction of this chapter is followed by a description of the research methodology used in this study. The population and sample study are also addressed prior to discussing the research methodologies employed to carry out this investigation. Muslims from Malaysia with knowledge of Islamic tourists make up the demographic of our study. In addition, 30% will be selected as the sample size for the study by the research. In order to collect data, the research also used a self-administered Google Form questionnaire. Additionally, a Likert scale for 5 parts assessing the runner, experiential aspect, and intention to participate again will be used to study instrument. Last but not least, the research will employ two statistic package for the social science for data analysis. The study will make use of SPSS, a program that is typical employees in research. Additionally, to handle the report of data analysis result on the scope, distribution of all variables, descriptive statistics, reliability statistics, and person correlation analysis were employed.